For 10 years, our mail carrier, Henry, delivered letters to every doorstep with a quiet kindness that never wavered, even on days when the Texas heat made the asphalt shimmer like water. And maybe that's why Karen, our HOA president, thought he'd be an easy target. When she first screamed in his face, Henry let it go. The next time she blocked his mail truck and accused him of trespassing on HOA property, he stayed calm and professional. But when she came at him with an aluminum bat, swinging like she wanted to erase him from the neighborhood entirely, the line had been crossed for good. What Karen didn't know was that Henry had been documenting everything, every threat, every shove, every slur, because mail carriers in high-incident districts like ours are trained to deal with hostile behavior and equipped with body cameras for exactly this reason. Assaulting a postal worker isn't a neighborhood dispute. It's a federal crime. So when Karen kept escalating, and that final swing of her bat was captured crystal clear on Henry's body cam, I didn't need to argue with her or the HOA. I just handed the footage to Henry's inspector, and the inspector passed it straight to the federal prosecutor. Karen thought the HOA would protect her, thought the rules didn't apply to her, thought she could attack a federal employee and walk away, untouched. The judge thought differently. She didn't get a warning. She got federal prison. Before I tell you how we got there, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from, because this story proves that no one, not even someone holding the keys to your community gate, is above the law. It was a Monday morning in early June. When I first noticed something was off, I was working from home that day, sitting at my desk in the front room with my laptop open and a cup of coffee going cold beside me. The window faced the street, and I'd gotten used to the rhythm of the neighborhood, the soft hum of lawnmowers, the occasional bark of a dog, and right around 11 a.m., the familiar sight of Henry's white and blue mail truck rolling down Maple Ridge Drive. Henry Mitchell had been our mail carrier for as long as I could remember. He was one of those people you didn't think much about until you realized how much you relied on him. Rain or shine, he showed up. He never missed a day. And in the summer, when the Texas heat turned brutal, I always left a cold bottle of water on top of the mailbox for him. He'd take it, wave, and keep moving. That was our routine. But that Monday, the routine broke. I saw Henry's truck slow to a stop near the corner, right where the road curved toward the community center. He stepped out, collected a bundle of mail from the back, and started walking toward the cluster of mailboxes mounted on a shared post. That's when I saw her, Karen Delilah Vaughn, though everyone just called her Delilah, our HOA president. She came out of nowhere, or maybe she'd been waiting, because her black Lexus was parked at an angle near the curb, the driver's door still open like she'd jumped out in a hurry. Delilah was in her late 50s, lean and sharp in a way that made you think of a blade. She wore oversized sunglasses and a cream-colored blouse, and she was moving fast. I watched her close the distance between herself and Henry in seconds. She didn't call out to him. She just planted herself directly in his path, several feet ahead. One hand raised, palm out, like a crossing guard stopping traffic. I couldn't hear what she was saying from inside my house, but I could see her mouth moving, fast and aggressive. Her other hand was pointing, jabbing the air in front of Henry's chest. He stopped walking. His posture didn't change. He just stood there, calm and still, holding the stack of mail against his side. He nodded once, said something brief, and then stepped around her to continue his route. Delilah didn't move. She stood there in the middle of the road, hands on her hips, watching him go. Then she turned and walked back to her car, but not before glancing around the street like she was checking to see who might have been watching. I leaned back from the window. Something about the whole interaction felt wrong. Not loud or violent, but sharp, like the first crack in a windshield. Small, but spreading. Later that afternoon, I was outside pulling weeds from the front flower bed when my neighbor, Mrs. Anderson, came by. She was watering her lawn across the street, the hose in one hand and her phone in the other. She saw me and waved, then crossed over. Mrs. Anderson was in her 60s, a retired teacher with a soft voice and a habit of worrying about everyone. She looked tired. I asked if everything was okay. She hesitated. glanced back toward her house, then said, "Delilah's at it again." I asked what she meant. Mrs. Anderson sighed and told me Delilah had been complaining about Henry for weeks, claiming he was parking in the wrong spots, stepping on HOA grass when he delivered mail, violating boundaries only she seemed to see. Mrs. Anderson said Delilah had even sent a complaint letter to the post office. I asked if Henry had done anything wrong. Mrs. Anderson shook her head. "He's just doing his job," she said. "But you know Delilah. Once she decides someone's broken a rule, she doesn't let go." I did know. Delilah had been HOA president for 6 years, and in that time she'd turned Maple Ridge Estates into her personal domain. Paint colors, fence heights, lawn schedules. It was all controlled. People were afraid to push back. I'd seen families fined for trivial violations, and those who resisted found life in the neighborhood unbearable. Delilah didn't see herself as a neighbor. She saw herself as an authority. And now, apparently, she'd decided that authority extended to a federal employee. That evening, I opened my mailbox to grab the day's delivery. On top of the stack was a bright yellow envelope with red block letters across the front. "Warning to USPS." I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed and signed by Delilah Vaughn, HOA president. The letter was addressed to the United States Postal Service and copied to all residents of Maple Ridge Estates. It accused Henry of repeatedly trespassing on HOA common property, failing to respect community boundaries, and creating a safety hazard with improper vehicle parking. It demanded that the Postal Service reassign Henry to a different route or face formal escalation. The tone was sharp and official, like she was writing a legal document, but the content was absurd. Henry wasn't trespassing. He was delivering mail on public streets. I folded the letter and looked down the street. Delilah's house sat at the corner, a large 2-story colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and an American flag hanging from the porch. The lights were on inside. I thought about throwing the letter away, pretending I'd never seen it, but something stopped me. I thought about the way Delilah had blocked Henry that morning, the way she'd pointed at him like he was beneath her. I thought about Mrs. Anderson's tired voice, and I realized this wasn't just about one letter. This was a pattern. Delilah had decided Henry was a problem, and she wasn't going to stop until she made him disappear. I went back inside and put the letter on my desk. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew I wasn't going to ignore it. 8 days later, it happened again. I was taking the trash out to the curb that Tuesday morning when I heard raised voices from the end of the street. The air was already thick with heat, the kind that made your shirt stick to your back the moment you stepped outside. I looked up and saw Henry's mail truck stopped at the curve near the entrance to Maple Ridge Drive. Delilah's Lexus was parked diagonally across the lane, blocking his path forward. She was standing in front of the truck, arms spread wide like she was physically preventing him from moving. Henry had already stepped out. He stood about 6 feet from her, hands at his sides, his posture calm but tense. I couldn't make out the words yet, but Delilah's voice carried sharp and clear across the morning air. I left the trash can at the curb and started walking toward them. As I got closer, I could hear what she was saying. "You were warned," she said. "I sent a formal letter. You do not have permission to park on this curve. This is HOA property." Henry's voice was low and steady. "Ma'am, this is a public street. I'm following my assigned route from the Postal Service." "I'm not on HOA property." Delilah stepped closer. Henry shifted his weight slightly, maintaining the distance between them. She jabbed her finger toward the ground. "This entire area falls under HOA jurisdiction," she said. "You're in violation of our community standards. I have the authority to enforce these rules." Henry didn't respond right away. He glanced past her, saw me approaching, and something in his expression shifted. Not relief exactly, but acknowledgement. He looked back at Delilah and said, "I understand you have concerns, but I need to finish my route. If you have an issue, you can contact my supervisor at the post office." That's when Delilah closed the distance. She didn't touch him, but she stepped right up to him, so close her finger was almost against his chest. Her voice dropped, but it was no less aggressive. "I decide the rules here," she said. "Not you, not the post office. Me." Henry took a half step back. His hands remained visible, non-threatening. I could see the small black device clipped to his uniform shirt. A body camera. The lens pointed forward. Delilah didn't seem to notice it, or maybe she didn't care. I stepped into her line of sight and said, "Ms. Vaughn, Henry's just doing his job. Can you let him finish?" She spun toward me, eyes blazing behind her sunglasses. "Ethan Locke," she said, "you don't get to tell me how to manage this community. If you have a problem with how I handle violations, you can bring it up at the next board meeting. Until then, stay out of it." I held her gaze. "There's no violation here," I said. "He's delivering mail on a public road. You don't have the authority to stop him." Delilah's jaw tightened. She looked at me, then at Henry, then back at me. For a moment, I thought she might actually back down, but instead, she pulled her phone from her pocket and held it up. "I'm documenting this," she said. "Both of you. Harassment of an HOA officer. This will be reported." She took a photo of Henry, then one of me. Henry didn't move. I just stood there, arms crossed. Then Delilah turned on her heel, walked back to her Lexus, and got in. She didn't move the car right away. She sat there, engine running, watching us through the windshield. Finally, she reversed out of the lane and drove off toward her house at the corner. Henry let out a slow breath. He looked at me and said, "Thanks for stepping in. I asked if he was okay." He nodded. "This isn't the first time," he said. "It's been escalating for a few weeks now. I've filed reports with my supervisor. They told me to keep documenting everything. That's why I have this." He tapped the body camera on his chest. "USPS started issuing these to carriers in districts with hostile incidents," he said. "I've been wearing it since the first time she blocked my truck. I asked if he'd captured what just happened." He nodded. "Everything. Audio and video. It's time-stamped and uploaded to a secure server at the end of every shift. If she keeps this up, my supervisor will escalate it to the postal inspector." I didn't fully understand what that meant at the time, but I could tell from Henry's tone that it was serious. He thanked me again, got back in his truck, and continued down the street. I walked back to my house, but I couldn't shake the image of Delilah standing inches from Henry, her finger in his face, her voice dripping with entitlement. That afternoon, I did something I probably should have done weeks ago. I pulled up my laptop and started researching. I typed in assault on postal worker federal law. The results came back immediately. Title 18, United States Code, Section 1114, Assault on federal officers and employees. I read through the summary. Any person who forcibly assaults, resists, opposes, impedes, intimidates, or interferes with a postal service employee while engaged in or on account of the performance of official duties can face up to 20 years in federal prison if a deadly weapon is used. Even without a weapon, it was still a felony. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. Delilah had no idea what she was dealing with. She thought she was enforcing HOA rules. She didn't realize she was committing a federal crime. I took a screenshot of the statute and saved it in a new folder on my desktop. I labeled it Maple Ridge Incident. Then I went back to the search bar and typed in HOA Authority Limits Texas. I found a legal blog post from a property attorney in Austin. It explained that HOAs in Texas have authority over private common areas, architectural guidelines, and deed restrictions, but they have zero jurisdiction over public streets, county roads, or federal employees performing official duties. Mail carriers fall under exclusive federal jurisdiction. An HOA president attempting to block, intimidate, or interfere with mail delivery could face civil penalties and criminal charges. I printed the article and added it to a physical folder I started keeping in my desk drawer. That evening, my daughter Lily asked me why I looked so worried. I told her it was nothing, just some neighborhood stuff. But the truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about the way Delilah had looked at Henry, the way she'd stepped into his space like she owned him, and I kept replaying her words in my head. I decide the rules here. Not you, not the post office. Me. It wasn't just arrogance. It was something deeper. She genuinely believed she had that power, and that belief made her dangerous. Because if she thought she could control a federal employee, there was no telling what she'd do next. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday evening, June 25th, at 7 p.m. in the community center. I hadn't planned on going. I usually avoided these meetings because they tended to drag on for hours, filled with petty disputes about lawn heights and paint samples. But after what I'd seen with Henry, and after the research I'd done on federal law, I knew I needed to be there. If Delilah was going to escalate this, I wanted to see it happen in front of witnesses. I wanted the community to know what she was doing. The community center was a low brick building at the north end of Maple Ridge Estates, wedged between the pool house and a small playground. By the time I arrived, the parking lot was nearly full. I counted 28 cars. Inside, folding chairs were arranged in rows facing a long table at the front. Delilah sat in the center chair, flanked by 2 other board members, both of whom looked uncomfortable. She had a leather binder open in front of her and a laptop to her right. A projector screen had been set up behind her. I took a seat in the 3rd row, next to Mrs. Anderson. She gave me a small, nervous smile. A few other neighbors nodded in my direction. Most people kept their eyes forward. Delilah called the meeting to order at 7:05. She went through the usual agenda items first: pool maintenance fees, landscaping contract renewals, a proposal to repaint the community center trim. Everything was delivered in her trademark clipped tone, efficient and authoritative. No one asked questions. No one pushed back. Then she reached the final item on the agenda: safety and traffic concerns. She stood up and clicked a button on her laptop. The projector screen lit up with a series of photographs. 6 images, all showing Henry's mail truck parked at various points along Maple Ridge Drive. In each photo, the truck was positioned legally on the public street, exactly where it needed to be for mail delivery. Delilah gestured to the screen. "As you can see," she said, "we have a recurring issue with unauthorized vehicle parking in areas that impact community safety and aesthetics. This is a United States Postal Service vehicle, and the driver has repeatedly ignored warnings to adjust his route. I've documented these violations over the past 3 weeks." She clicked to the next slide. It was a copy of the letter she'd sent to the post office, the same one I'd found in my mailbox. "The tone has been uncooperative," she continued, "and I believe it's time we take collective action. I'm proposing that we submit a formal group complaint to USPS demanding the reassignment of this carrier." I felt my jaw tighten. I glanced at Mrs. Anderson. She was staring at her lap, her hands folded tightly. No one else said anything. Delilah scanned the room, clearly expecting agreement. Then I raised my hand. She looked at me, and for a split second, I saw annoyance flicker across her face. "Yes, Ethan," she said. I stood up. "Ms. Vaughn, those are public streets," I said. "The HOA doesn't have jurisdiction over mail delivery routes. Henry's doing his job. We don't have the authority to demand his reassignment." Delilah's expression hardened. "Mr. Locke, do you have a law degree?" I said no. "Then I'd appreciate it if you didn't interrupt me with uninformed opinions," she said. "These photos clearly show a pattern of disregard for community standards." I stayed standing. "They show a mail carrier following his assigned route." I said, "If you file a complaint like this, you're wasting everyone's time, and you're harassing a federal employee." The room went silent. A few people shifted in their seats. Delilah's face flushed. "Harassing," she repeated. "I'm protecting this community. If you have a problem with how I manage the HOA, you're welcome to leave." I didn't sit down. "I'm not leaving," I said. "But I think everyone here should know that interfering with mail delivery is a federal offense. You can't block his truck. You can't intimidate him. And you definitely can't get him fired because you don't like where he parks." Mrs. Anderson spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think Ethan's right," she said. "Henry has always been respectful. Maybe we should focus on fixing the pool fence instead." Delilah turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Anderson, if you're not satisfied with my leadership, you're free to run for president yourself." Mrs. Anderson shrank back in her chair. I felt anger rising in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. I looked around the room. Half the people were staring at the floor. The other half looked like they wanted to say something, but didn't dare. Delilah closed her binder with a sharp snap. "We're going to vote," she said. "All in favor of submitting the formal complaint to USPS. Raise your hand." I watched as hands slowly went up around the room. 18 people. Some raised their hands quickly. Others hesitated, glancing around nervously before lifting theirs halfway. Delilah counted them aloud, her voice triumphant. 18 in favor. She looked at me. Opposed. I raised my hand. Mrs. Anderson raised hers. A man in the back row, someone I didn't recognize, raised his too. That was it. 3 of us. Delilah wrote the numbers down in her binder. Motion passes, she said. I'll submit the complaint tomorrow. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. People filed out quietly, avoiding eye contact. I waited until most of them had left, then walked over to Mrs. Anderson. She looked shaken. I asked if she was okay. She nodded, but her hands were trembling. I shouldn't have said anything. She whispered, "Now she's going to come after me." I told her she did the right thing, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Delilah had just demonstrated exactly how much control she had over this community. People were afraid of her, and fear made them complicit. I walked out to the parking lot and found Henry leaning against his personal car, a silver Honda Civic. He'd been waiting. I asked how long he'd been there. "Long enough," he said. "My supervisor told me about the meeting. I wanted to see if anyone would stand up. I told him 3 people had voted against Delilah's complaint." He nodded slowly. "That's more than I expected," he said. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to me. It had the name and contact information for a USPS Office of Inspector General Agent. "If things escalate," Henry said, "call this number. My supervisor already opened a case file. They're monitoring the situation." I looked at the card, then back at him. "You think it's going to get worse?" I said. He didn't answer right away. He just looked past me, toward the community center, where Delilah's Lexus was still parked under the light. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think it's going to get worse." It was July 2nd, a Friday afternoon, and the heat had broken records across central Texas. The weather report said 104 degrees, but out on the asphalt, it felt like stepping onto a griddle. I was inside with the air conditioning running full blast, trying to focus on a coding project for work, when I heard shouting outside. Not the distant kind you can ignore. Close, aggressive. I pushed my chair back and went to the window. Henry's mail truck was stopped in the middle of the curved section of Maple Ridge Drive, about 50 yards from my house, but he wasn't in the truck. He was standing near the mailboxes, holding a stack of letters, and blocking the entire road in front of him was a makeshift barricade. Orange traffic cones, the kind you see at construction sites, were arranged in a line across both lanes. A chain had been strung between 2 of them, and in the center, propped up on a metal stand, was a hand-painted sign. Bright yellow background, red block letters, "No parking, HOA enforcement zone." Delilah stood next to the barricade, arms crossed, sunglasses on, watching Henry like a guard at a checkpoint. I grabbed my phone and headed for the door. By the time I got outside, I could hear what she was saying. "This area is restricted," she said. "You've been warned multiple times. I'm within my rights to enforce community safety regulations." Henry's voice was steady but strained. "Ma'am, this is a public road. I need access to deliver mail to these homes. You're obstructing a federal employee." Delilah didn't move. "You can deliver from the other side of the neighborhood," she said. "This road is closed." I started walking toward them, phone in hand, recording. I didn't announce it. I just held the phone low and let the camera capture everything. Henry saw me coming. Something in his shoulders relaxed slightly. He turned back to Delilah. "I'm asking you one more time to remove the barricade," he said. Delilah tilted her head. "Or, what? You'll report me. Go ahead. The HOA has legal standing." Henry didn't respond. He just reached up and tapped the body camera clipped to his chest. "Everything you're doing right now is being recorded," he said. "Video and audio. It's being transmitted in real time to Postal Service servers." Delilah's expression flickered, just for a second. Then she stepped forward, closed the gap between them to less than 3 feet. "You think that camera scares me," she said. "I have documentation too. I have photos, emails, and witness statements. You're the one who's going to lose your job, not me." I stepped into the frame. "Ms. Vaughn," I said, "you need to move the barricade. This is illegal." She whipped around. When she saw my phone pointed at her, her face went red. "You're recording me," she said. Without my consent, I kept the phone steady. "We're on a public street," I said. "I don't need your consent." And you're obstructing mail delivery, which is a federal crime." Delilah's hand shot out toward my phone. I pulled back. She lunged forward, fingers grasping for the device. I twisted my body, keeping it out of reach. "Stop," I said. "Don't touch me." She didn't stop. She grabbed at my wrist, trying to wrench the phone free. Henry stepped between us immediately, his hands up, not touching either of us, but creating a barrier. "Ma'am, stop," he said firmly. "You need to step back right now." Delilah froze, breathing hard. Her hand was still reaching toward me over Henry's shoulder. Then she seemed to realize what she was doing. She pulled her hand back, but the anger didn't leave her face. "You're both going to regret this," she said. Her voice shook slightly. Not fear. Rage barely held in check. "The HOA board will hear about this. I'll have you fined. Ethan, and you," she pointed at Henry, "will be reported to every federal agency I can find." Henry didn't flinch. "You can report whatever you want," he said. "But right now, you need to remove this barricade and let me finish my route." Delilah stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned, walked over to the sign, yanked it off the stand. She picked up the cones one by one, throwing them into the back of her Lexus with sharp, violent movements. The chain she left on the ground. When the road was clear, Henry nodded at her. "Thank you," he said quietly. Delilah slammed the trunk of her car and got in without another word. She sat there for a few seconds, engine idling, staring at us through the windshield. Then she reversed, turned sharply, and sped off toward her house. I lowered my phone, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. Henry looked at me. "Did you get that?" he asked. I nodded. "All of it." He exhaled slowly. "Good. I'm going to need a copy. I'll send it to my supervisor and the inspector. I told him I'd email it as soon as I got home." Henry finished his deliveries and drove off. I walked back to my house, reviewed the footage on my phone. Delilah is setting up the barricade. She refuses to move. She lunges for my phone. Henry stepping in. It was all there. Clear. Undeniable. I uploaded the video to my laptop and sent it to Henry's work email. Then I saved 3 backup copies in different locations. That evening, I checked my own mailbox. Inside was a single envelope. HOA letterhead. I opened it. Notice of violation. Ethan Locke. Code of conduct breach. Hostile behavior toward HOA leadership. Fine $500. Due within 14 days. I read it twice. There was no specific rule cited. No evidence provided. Just the accusation and the penalty. I sat on my front steps and stared at the letter. This was Delilah's retaliation. She couldn't control Henry, so she was coming after me, trying to punish me for standing up, trying to make an example. I thought about Lily inside, doing homework at the kitchen table. She had no idea what was happening out here. No idea that our neighbor, the woman who smiled and waved at community barbecues, was capable of this. And I realized something that made my stomach tighten. If Delilah was willing to fabricate violations and threaten federal employees, there was no telling how far she'd go, or who else she'd hurt. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the letter. Then I texted it to Henry with a short message. "She's retaliating." He replied within minutes. "Document everything. The inspector wants to talk to you. I'll send you his contact info." An hour later, I had an email from Special Agent Marcus Reed, USPS Office of Inspector General. He wanted to schedule a call. I replied immediately. "I'm available anytime." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look on Delilah's face when she'd tried to grab my phone. The fury, the entitlement. She genuinely believed she was in the right, that she had the authority to do whatever she wanted. And the scariest part was, most of the neighborhood had let her believe it for so long that she'd stopped seeing any boundaries at all. On July 9th, a Tuesday evening, I hosted a small gathering in my backyard. It wasn't planned as anything formal, just a few neighbors I trusted, people who'd quietly expressed concern about Delilah over the past few weeks. Mrs. Anderson came. So did Dave Milligan, a guy in his early 50s who lived 3 houses down and worked as an electrician. There was also Sarah Park, a nurse who'd moved in 2 years ago, and Tom Brennan, a retired firefighter who'd been in the neighborhood longer than anyone except Delilah herself. I set out folding chairs on the patio and kept the grill going with burgers and hot dogs. Lily was inside watching a movie. The sun was starting to drop, and the heat had finally become bearable. The air smelled like charcoal and cut grass. Cicadas buzzed in the trees. We didn't talk about Delilah right away. We talked about work, about the pool needing repairs, about the 4th of July fireworks we'd all missed because of the heat warnings. But eventually, the conversation shifted. Dave was the one who brought it up. He set his beer down on the armrest and looked at me. "Ethan," he said, "I saw what happened last week, with the barricade. I was driving back from a job site. I wanted to stop, but I didn't know if it would make things worse. I told him it was fine, that Henry and I had handled it. But Dave shook his head. "It's not fine," he said. "She's losing it, and we're all just letting her." Mrs. Anderson shifted in her chair, folding her hands in her lap. "She's done this before," she said quietly. "Not with Henry, but with others. There was a family a few years back, the Caldwells. Delilah fined them $2,000 over a door color. When they fought it, she made their lives hell, drove by their house at night, filed noise complaints when their kids played outside. They moved within 6 months." Sarah leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I didn't know it got that bad," she said. Mrs. Anderson nodded. "Most people don't, because everyone's too afraid to talk." Tom Brennan had been quiet until now. He rubbed his jaw, staring at the grill. "I've been here since 2008, he said. "Back then, the HOA was reasonable. Delilah ran unopposed after the last president retired. No one thought she'd be a problem. But once she got in, she rewrote the bylaws, stacked the board. Now she acts like she owns the place. I asked if anyone had ever tried to vote her out." Tom shook his head. "You need 60% of homeowners for a special election. And someone is willing to run against her. Most people are too scared. The few who tried got buried in fines until they gave up." Dave leaned back, arms crossed. "She keeps files on everyone," he said. "I saw her office once. Binders, one for every household. Photos, notes, records. It's like she's building cases." The group went quiet. The cicadas seemed louder. Sarah broke the silence. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We can't just let her keep doing this." I told them about the video I'd recorded, about Henry's body camera, about the USPS Inspector General opening a case. I showed them the email from Special Agent Reed. "We document everything." I said, "Every interaction, every threat, every bogus fine. We build a record. And if she keeps escalating, we make sure the right people see it." Mrs. Anderson looked worried. She twisted the edge of her sleeve. "What if she retaliates?" she asked. "She already went after you with that $500 fine. What's to stop her from doing the same to all of us?" I didn't have a perfect answer. But I said, "If we all stand together, she can't target everyone. And if she tries, it'll just prove she's abusing her power." Dave nodded slowly. "I'm in," he said. "I'll start keeping a log." Sarah agreed. Tom said he'd talk to a few other long-time residents. Mrs. Anderson hesitated, then said, "I'll help, but I'm scared." I admitted I was too, but doing nothing felt worse. The gathering broke up around 9 p.m. Everyone left quietly, like we'd just held some kind of covert meeting. Maybe we had. After they were gone, I sat on the patio alone, staring at the empty chairs. The sky had deepened to violet. Streetlights flickered on one by one down Maple Ridge Drive. I thought about what Mrs. Anderson had said, about Delilah driving by houses at 2 in the morning, about her keeping files on everyone. It wasn't just controlling. It was obsessive. And obsession like that didn't de-escalate. It only got worse. I went inside and checked on Lily. She was asleep on the couch, the TV still playing softly. I turned it off and carried her upstairs to bed. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. I stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe. I thought about how much she trusted this neighborhood, how safe she felt here. And I realized that safety was an illusion. Delilah had shattered the moment she decided rules didn't apply to her. Later that night, around 11:30, I was getting ready for bed when I heard something outside. A car engine, idling low. I went to the window and looked out. Delilah's black Lexus was parked on the street, directly in front of my house. The headlights were off, but I could see her silhouette in the driver's seat. She was holding up her phone. I pointed it toward my house, taking pictures. I stood there, half hidden by the curtain, watching her. She took several photos, adjusted her angle, took more. Then she lowered the phone and just sat there. staring, not moving, just watching. I felt a chill run through me despite the warm air. I grabbed my own phone and took a photo of her car from the window. The timestamp read 11:37 p.m. Then I stepped back, out of sight, and waited. She sat there for another 5 minutes. Then, without turning her headlights on, she started the engine and slowly rolled down the street. I watched until her taillights disappeared around the corner. I opened my laptop and sent the photo to Henry, to Special Agent Reed, and to the group email I'd just created. Subject line: Delilah outside my house, 11:37 p.m. The photo said everything. She wasn't enforcing rules anymore. She was hunting. Friday, July 19th. The temperature hit 106 degrees by mid-morning, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and turned car steering wheels into branding irons. I was working at my desk, windows closed, blinds half drawn to keep the sun out. Around 10:15, I heard shouting again. My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. I pushed back from the desk and went to the window. Henry's mail truck was parked at the usual spot near the curve. But this time, Delilah wasn't just standing there. She was holding something. Long, metallic. An aluminum baseball bat. Silver and gleaming in the sunlight. I didn't think. I just moved. I was out the door and running down the driveway before I even grabbed my phone. By the time I reached the street, I could hear everything. Delilah was standing about 10 feet from Henry, the bat gripped in both hands, not raised yet, but held across her body like a barrier, or a threat. "You don't get to ignore me," she was saying. Her voice was higher than usual, strained. "I warned you. I filed complaints. I set boundaries, and you just keep coming back." Henry stood near the mailboxes, his mailbag still slung over his shoulder. His hands were visible, palms out, non-threatening. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Please put the bat down. I'm just here to deliver mail. I'm not a threat to you." Delilah took a step closer. The bat shifted slightly in her hands. "You are a threat," she said. "You don't respect this community. You don't respect me. I'm the president of this HOA. I have authority here." Henry's eyes flicked to the body camera on his chest, then back to her. "Ma'am, you're holding a weapon," he said. "I need you to put it down, now." Delilah's jaw tightened. "This is my property," she said. "I have a right to defend it." Henry shook his head slowly. "This is a public street," he said, "and I'm a federal employee. What you're doing right now is a crime. I was close enough now to intervene." "Delilah!" I shouted. She spun toward me, eyes wild. The bat swung slightly as she turned. "Put it down," I said. "You're threatening him." She stared at me for a moment, breathing hard. Then she turned back to Henry. "This is your fault," she said, pointing the bat at him. "You brought this on yourself." I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. I kept my voice steady. "I'm calling the police," I said. "A woman is threatening a postal worker with a weapon." Delilah heard me. Her head whipped around. "You're calling the cops on me," she said. In my own neighborhood, I kept the phone to my ear. The dispatcher answered. I gave the address, described the situation. Woman with a baseball bat, threatening a federal employee. Yes, he's still here. Yes, she still has the bat. Delilah was shaking now, but not with fear, with rage. She pointed the bat at me. "You're going to regret this." "Ethan," she said, "you think you can turn people against me. I built this community. I keep it safe. Without me, this place falls apart." Henry's voice cut through. "Ma'am, the police are on their way. Please put the weapon down before this gets worse." Delilah turned back to him. She stared at him for a long moment. Then, suddenly, she swung the bat, not at Henry, at the metal mailbox cluster behind him. The impact was loud, a sharp crack that echoed down the street. The mailbox is dented, mail scattered. Henry flinched, but didn't move from his spot. Delilah raised the bat again, breathing hard. "This is a warning," she said. Her voice was shaking. "Next time, I won't miss." Henry's hand moved slowly to the radio clipped to his shoulder. He pressed the button. "Dispatch. This is Carrier 473. I have an active threat situation. The subject is armed with a bat. Requesting immediate police assistance at Maple Ridge Drive, Maple Ridge Estates, Within seconds, I heard Mrs. Anderson's voice from across the street. Oh my God! I turned and saw her standing on her front lawn, phone in hand. Dave Milligan was jogging up from his house, still in his work boots. Sarah Park appeared at the end of the block. All of them were watching. All of them were witnesses. Delilah seemed to notice the growing audience. She looked around, the bat still in her hands, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in her expression. Not regret, not shame, confusion. Like she couldn't understand why everyone was looking at her like she'd done something wrong. The sound of sirens cut through the air. 2 sheriff's department vehicles came around the corner, lights flashing. They pulled up fast, blocking both ends of the street. 4 deputies got out, hands on their holsters but not drawn. One of them, a tall man with graying hair and a calm demeanor, stepped forward. "Ma'am," he called out, "drop the bat. Put it on the ground. Now." Delilah turned toward him. Her hands tightened on the bat. "I'm the HOA president," she said. "I was defending community property." The deputy didn't move. "I don't care who you are," he said. "Drop the weapon. Last warning." For a moment, I thought she might actually swing at him, but then her shoulders sagged. She let the bat fall to the pavement with a metallic clang. The deputy approached slowly, kicked the bat away, and gestured for her to turn around. "Hands behind your back," he said. Delilah's face went pale. "What? No, I didn't do anything wrong." The deputy pulled out his handcuffs. "Ma'am, you just assaulted federal property and threatened a postal worker with a weapon. Turn around." Delilah didn't resist. She just stood there, stunned, as he cuffed her wrists. Another deputy picked up the bat, held it carefully by the handle, and placed it in an evidence bag. The first deputy turned to Henry. "Are you injured?" Sir Henry shook his head. "No, but she struck the mailbox." He pointed to the dented metal. The deputy nodded and wrote something in his notebook. "We'll need your statement and any footage from your body camera." Henry tapped the device on his chest. "It's all recorded," he said. The deputy looked at me. "You called it in?" I nodded. "Did you see what happened?" I told him I saw everything. He asked me to stay while they took statements. I watched as they walked Delilah to one of the patrol cars. She didn't look back. She didn't say anything. She just stared straight ahead as they guided her into the back seat. Mrs. Anderson came over, her face pale. "Is she going to jail?" she asked. The deputy overheard and said, "She'll be taken in for processing. Charges will depend on the federal investigation and the district attorney. But threatening a postal worker is serious. If the inspector presses charges, it could be federal." Henry was giving his statement to another deputy, gesturing toward the dented mailbox and his body camera. I saw him replay the footage on a small screen the deputy held. The deputy's face hardened as he watched. After about 20 minutes, the deputies finished. One of them came over to me and handed me a card. "Detective Miller, Travis County Sheriff. If we need to follow up, we'll contact you." The patrol car with Delilah inside pulled away. No sirens this time, just lights. I stood there in the street, watching it disappear. The bat was gone. Delilah was gone. But the adrenaline was still buzzing in my veins. Henry walked over, adjusting his mailbag. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Are you?" He touched his shoulder where the bat had come close. "Yeah," he said. "That was too close. Though, if she'd actually swung at me..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Dave and Sarah came over. Sarah looked shaken. "I can't believe she actually did that." She said, "I can," Dave muttered. "She's been building to this for years. Henry said he needed to finish his route, file his report, and contact the postal inspector. I told him to be careful. He gave me a small, tired smile. 'Always am,' he said." After he left, the 4 of us stood there for a moment, not saying much. Then Mrs. Anderson said quietly, "Do you think this is over?" I looked down the street, toward Delilah's house at the corner. The lights were off. The driveway is empty. "I don't know," I said. "But at least now there's a record. At least now, people saw what she's capable of." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment Delilah swung the bat, the sound it made, the look in her eyes. She hadn't been trying to scare Henry. She'd been trying to hurt him. And if he'd been standing 6 inches closer, she would have. Friday, July 26th, 1 week after Delilah was taken away in the back of a sheriff's patrol car, the neighborhood had been quiet since then, almost unnaturally so. No HOA emails, no violation notices, no black Lexus circling the streets at night. People were starting to relax, starting to believe maybe it was actually over. But I knew better. Delilah had been released on bail 2 days after her arrest. I'd gotten a text from Special Agent Reed confirming it. She was out, and she was angry. That morning, the heat was unbearable again. 106 degrees before noon. I was inside with Lily, making her lunch, when my phone buzzed. A text from Dave. Check the neighborhood group chat. Now. I opened the app. There were 37 unread messages, all from the last 10 minutes. Scrolling up, I saw the first message was from Tom Brennan. Subject line: Delilah just confronted Henry again. At the intersection, she has a bat. Someone call 911. My blood went cold. I told Lily to stay inside, locked the door behind me, and ran. I didn't even grab my car keys. I just ran toward the main intersection at the center of Maple Ridge Estates, where 4 streets converged near the community mailbox station. By the time I got there, I wasn't the only one. Mrs. Anderson was already standing on the sidewalk, phone in hand. Dave was running from the opposite direction. Sarah's car screeched to a stop at the curb, and in the middle of the intersection, under the brutal midday sun, was Delilah. She was holding a bat again. This one was black, heavier looking than the aluminum one from before. She stood directly in front of Henry's mail truck, which was stopped at an angle, hazard lights flashing. Henry was outside the vehicle, standing about 15 feet away, hands raised. His body camera was on. I could see the small red recording light blinking. Delilah's face was flushed, her hair wild and sticking to her forehead. She wasn't yelling. That was the worst part. She was speaking in a low, almost calm voice, but the words were venomous. "You ruined my life," she said. "You and him." She pointed the bat at Henry, then swung it toward me as I approached. "I lost my position. I lost my respect. People are laughing at me. This is your fault." Henry's voice was steady but strained. "Ma'am, you need to put the bat down. You're violating the terms of your bail. If you don't stop, you're going to prison." Delilah laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. "Prison," she said. "For what?" "Defending my community." For doing my job, I stepped closer, but not too close. "Delilah," I said. "This is over. You need to walk away." She turned to me, eyes blazing. "It's not over," she said. "Not until people understand. I built this place. I kept it clean, kept it safe, kept it orderly. And this is how I'm repaid. With handcuffs, with charges." Her voice cracked. "I gave everything to this neighborhood. Everything. And you all turned on me." "Mrs. M?" Anderson spoke up from the sidewalk, her voice shaking. "Delilah, no one turned on you. You did this to yourself." Delilah's head snapped toward her. "You," she said, pointing the bat. "You were always weak, always complaining, always undermining me." Mrs. Anderson took a step back, her face pale. Dave moved in front of her, hands up. "Delilah, enough," he said. "You're scaring people. Put the bat down." Delilah's breathing was heavy now. She looked around at the growing crowd. 6 people, then 8, then 10. Neighbors coming out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. Some were recording on their phones. Others were just standing there, frozen. Henry took a slow step forward. "Ms. Vaughn," he said. "I know you're upset, but this isn't the way. You're making it worse." Delilah shook her head violently. "Worse," she said. "It can't get worse. You already destroyed me." She turned back to him, and for a moment, I thought she might actually lower the bat. But then something shifted in her expression, a hardness, a finality. She stepped forward, closing the distance between her and Henry to less than 10 feet. "If I'm going down," she said, "you're coming with me." Everything happened fast. Delilah raised the bat over her shoulder. Henry didn't run. He just stood there, hands still raised, body camera recording. I started moving toward them, shouting, "Stop!" Delilah swung. Henry twisted to the side, but not fast enough. The bat connected with his left shoulder. A sickening thud, that echoed across the intersection. Henry staggered, dropped to one knee, his hand going to his shoulder. The body camera shook but stayed on. Delilah raised the bat again. I didn't think. I just lunged forward, putting myself between them. The bat came down. I threw my arm up. It hit my forearm, a sharp burst of pain that shot up to my elbow. I stumbled back, but didn't fall. Dave was there a second later, grabbing Delilah's arm, pulling the bat away. She fought him, screaming, "Let go of me. This is my community." Dave wrestled the bat from her grip and threw it across the pavement. Tom Brennan grabbed her other arm. She thrashed, but between the two of them, they held her still. Sarah ran to Henry, kneeling beside him. "Are you okay? Can you move?" Henry nodded, wincing. "Shoulder," he said through gritted teeth. "She got my shoulder." Sarah looked at me. "Call an ambulance. Now." I pulled out my phone with my good hand, the other arm throbbing. I dialed 911 for the second time in a week. Assault in progress. Federal employee injured. Maple Ridge Estates. Main intersection. We need police and EMS immediately. The operator kept me on the line. I looked over at Delilah. She'd stopped struggling. She was just standing there between Dave and Tom, her face blank, staring at Henry like she couldn't comprehend what she'd just done. People were surrounding us now, at least 15 neighbors, all of them watching. All of them are recording. Mrs. Anderson was crying. A man I didn't recognize was shouting at Delilah, calling her crazy. Another woman was on her phone, probably calling the police. 2 sirens. Closer this time. 3 patrol cars came screaming into the intersection, followed by an ambulance. Deputies jumped out, guns drawn this time. "Hands up, everyone, step back." Dave and Tom released Delilah and raised their hands. I did the same. Despite the pain in my arm, the deputies moved in fast, surrounding Delilah. She didn't resist. She just let them cuff her again, her face empty, like all the fight had drained out of her. One deputy picked up the bat, now lying 10 feet away, and bagged it. Paramedics rushed to Henry. They eased him onto a stretcher, checking his shoulder, his vitals. He was conscious, talking to them, but his face was tight with pain. Another paramedic came over to me. "Let me see your arm," she said. I held it out. She examined it, pressed gently. "You're going to have a nasty bruise," she said. "Possibly a hairline fracture. We need to take you in for x-rays." I told her I was fine. She gave me a look. "You're not fine. Get in the ambulance." Henry was loaded into the back. I climbed in after him, sitting on the side bench. As the doors closed, I looked out through the small window. Delilah was being put into a patrol car again. But this time, there were no words, no threats. She just stared straight ahead, blank and hollow. The ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing. Henry looked at me from the stretcher. "You didn't have to do that," he said. I shrugged with my good shoulder. "Yeah, I did." At the hospital, they confirmed Henry had a deep shoulder contusion and possible rotator cuff damage. He'd need weeks of physical therapy. My arm had a hairline fracture. They put it in a brace and told me to rest it for 6 weeks. While we were waiting in the ER, Special Agent Reed called. He'd already been notified by the deputies on scene. "I'm escalating this to the U.S. Attorney's office," he said. "She just assaulted a federal employee with a deadly weapon in front of multiple witnesses. This is going federal. Full prosecution." I asked what that meant. Reed's voice was firm. "It means she's done. Monday, August 5th, 2 weeks after Delilah's second arrest. I was sitting in the federal courthouse in downtown Austin, Western District of Texas, waiting for the arraignment to begin. The building was imposing, all stone and glass, with high ceilings and the kind of quiet that made every footstep echo. Henry sat beside me, his left arm still in a sling. Mrs. Anderson was on my other side, hands folded in her lap. Dave, Sarah, and Tom were in the row behind us. We weren't the only ones. At least a dozen other neighbors had shown up, filling the public gallery. Everyone wanted to see this through. The courtroom itself was formal and austere. Dark wood paneling, the American flag, and the Texas flag flanked the judge's bench. A court reporter sat ready at her station. At the defense table, Delilah sat with her attorney, a middle-aged man in a gray suit who looked tired. Delilah herself looked smaller somehow. diminished. Her hair was pulled back tight. She wore a plain navy dress. No sunglasses. No defiance. Just a blank, hollowed-out expression. At the prosecution table sat Assistant U.S. Attorney Monica Sharp, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a reputation for not losing cases. The bailiff stood. All rise. We stood as Judge Patricia Harmon entered. She was a black woman in her early 60s, with silver streaks in her hair and a no-nonsense presence that filled the room. She took her seat. We sat. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Patricia Harmon presiding. Case number 24-CR-387. United States of America versus Delilah Karen Vaughn. Judge Harmon looked down at the file in front of her, then up at Delilah. Ms. Vaughn, she said, you are charged with 3 federal counts. Count 1 assault on a federal employee in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 111. Count 2 obstruction of mail delivery in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 1701. Count 3 assault with a deadly weapon causing bodily injury. She paused. Do you understand these charges? Delilah's attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor, he said. My client understands. Judge Harmon looked at Delilah directly. I need to hear it from you. Ms. Vaughn, do you understand the charges against you? Delilah stood slowly. Her voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor, the judge nodded. How do you plead? There was a long pause. Delilah's attorney leaned over and whispered something to her. Then she said, Not guilty, Your Honor. The words were flat, empty. AUSA Sharp stood. Your Honor, the government requests that bail be denied. Ms. Vaughn has already violated the terms of her previous release. She committed a second assault while out on bail, this time causing bodily harm to the victim. She is a clear and present danger to the community and to Mr. Mr. Henry Mitchell specifically. Judge Harmon looked at the defense attorney. Counselor, he stood. Your Honor, my client has deep ties to the community. She's a homeowner, a longtime resident, and she has no prior criminal record. We ask that she be released under house arrest with electronic monitoring. AUSA Sharp didn't hesitate. Your Honor, Ms. Chow. Vaughn used her position as HOA president to stalk, harass, and intimidate a federal employee over the course of 6 weeks. When warned by law enforcement, she escalated. When arrested, she was released and escalated again. She is not capable of following court orders. The community is safer with her in custody. Judge Harmon reviewed the file. Then she looked up. I've reviewed the body camera footage submitted by the Postal Inspection Service, she said. I've reviewed witness statements from 6 individuals. I've seen the medical reports. Ms. Vaughn, you didn't just threaten Mr. Mitchell. You struck him with a weapon. You caused injury. And you did this in broad daylight, in front of multiple witnesses, while already facing charges for similar conduct. She paused. This court cannot ignore that. Bail is denied. You will remain in federal custody pending trial. Delilah's face didn't change. She just nodded slightly. Her attorney sat down, defeated. The judge continued. Trial is set for September 15th. In the meantime, the defendant will be held at the Federal Detention Center. She looked at Asa Sharp. Does the government wish to make any additional remarks? Sharp stood. Only that Mr. Mitchell has fully cooperated with this investigation, as have several members of the Maple Ridge Estates community. Their testimony and evidence will be central to this case. Judge Harmon nodded. Noted. This court is adjourned. She struck the gavel once. The sound was final. 2 U.S. Marshals approached Delilah. She stood without resistance. They cuffed her hands in front of her and led her toward the side door. As she passed our row, she glanced at Henry. Just for a second. There was no anger in her eyes, no defiance, just exhaustion. Then she was gone. The courtroom emptied slowly. Henry let out a long breath. It's really over, he said quietly. I nodded. For now, we still have the trial. But yeah, it's over. Outside the courthouse, we gathered on the steps. The August heat was relentless, but no one seemed to care. Mrs. Anderson hugged Henry carefully, avoiding his injured shoulder. I'm so glad you're okay, she said. Henry smiled. Thanks to all of you. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't stood up, This could have gone very differently. Dave shook his head. You stood up first, he said. You kept doing your job even when she made it hell. That takes guts, Sarah added. And now she's facing real consequences. Federal prison. That's not something you just walk away from. Special Agent Reed had been standing off to the side. He came over and shook Henry's hand. You did everything right, he said. Documentation, body camera, following protocol. That's what made this case solid. He looked at the rest of us. And you all provided critical witness testimony. Without that, it would have been harder to prove a pattern of behavior. Tom asked what would happen next. Reed explained. There'll be a trial in September unless she takes a plea deal. Given the evidence, most defense attorneys would advise a plea. If she's convicted, she's looking at 3 years minimum in federal prison, possibly more depending on sentencing guidelines. No parole. Federal sentences don't have early release. Mrs. Anderson asked, What about the HOA? Reed smiled slightly. That's a civil matter, but I'd imagine the board will be restructured pretty quickly. Tom nodded. We're holding an emergency meeting next week. Mrs. Anderson agreed to serve as interim president. Mrs. Anderson blushed slightly. I didn't want it, she said. But someone has to step up, and we need to undo a lot of the damage Delilah caused, Dave added. We're already reviewing every fine she issued in the last 6 years. Most of them were bogus. We'll be issuing refunds. We stood there for a few more minutes, talking, processing. Then, one by one, people started to leave. Henry shook my hand. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. I told him he didn't need to thank me. He smiled. Yeah, I do. You didn't have to get involved, but you did, and that made all the difference. I watched him walk to his car, still favoring his left side but moving steadily. Mrs. Anderson, Dave, Sarah, and Tom said their goodbyes. I stood alone on the courthouse steps for a moment, looking up at the building. It felt surreal. 2 months ago, this had just been a neighborhood dispute. Now, it was a federal case. I drove home slowly, windows down, letting the hot air blow through. When I pulled into my driveway, Lily was sitting on the front porch, waiting. She ran over as I got out. Dad, is it over? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, sweetheart, it's over. She hugged me tight. I'm glad, she said. I didn't like how scared you looked. I held her for a moment. Then we went inside together. That evening, I sat on the back patio with a cold drink, watching the sun set over Maple Ridge Estates. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, the way it used to be. 3 weeks later, I got an email from AUSA Sharp. Delilah had taken a plea deal, guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for mid-September. The plea agreement recommended 3 years in federal prison, 2 years supervised release, $10,000 restitution to Henry, a mandatory psychological evaluation, and a 10-year ban from holding any community leadership position. I forwarded the email to Henry. He replied within minutes. Justice served. On September 20th. Delilah was formally sentenced, 3 years, federal correctional institution, no parole for the first year. When she got out, she'd be monitored, restricted, and barred from ever controlling a community again. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. It was enough to know that the system had worked, that documentation, witnesses, and the law had done what they were supposed to do. That night, I saw Henry's mail truck roll down Maple Ridge Drive at 11 a.m., right on schedule. I walked outside and left a cold bottle of water on the mailbox. Henry stopped, grabbed it, took a long drink, and waved. I waved back. Everything was back to normal, or as normal as it could be. Delilah had thought the HOA made her untouchable. She'd thought her position gave her power over everyone, even federal employees. She was wrong. The judge made that clear. And now, the neighborhood could finally breathe again. Delilah thought power meant she could ignore the law. She was wrong. If you've ever faced someone who abused their authority, you know how important it is to stand up and document everything. Justice isn't always fast, but it's real when you fight for it. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and join Karma Fence, where we share stories of accountability and consequences. Drop a comment. Tell us your experience.